In an extraordinary interview tonight, Prince Harry has spoken candidly about the breakdown of his relationship with his father.
The clocks inside Buckingham Palace have a way of stopping when a sovereign dies. Not literally, but in the corridors of constitutional power. The moment a king draws his final breath, time collapses into a ruthless sequence of protocols that have been rehearsed, revised, and re-rehearsed for decades. Every second of what follows is governed not by grief, but by procedure. And for Prince Harry and Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, those first 24 hours will not be a time of quiet mourning. They will be a countdown, a systematic, clinical, and in many ways devastating dismantling of everything they still hold by virtue of their connection to King Charles III. Because here is the reality that most royal watchers miss in the emotionally charged aftermath of a monarch's death. Charles has been the Sussexes' last line of protection. Not in a sentimental way, though that too, but in a deeply structural, constitutional, and financial way. He has been the buffer between Harry and the full institutional weight of a monarchy that has not forgiven what it considers a betrayal. The moment that buffer is gone, there is no soft landing. There is only King William V. And William is not a man who runs the monarchy on sentiment. So, what exactly happens? What do Harry and Meghan stand to lose? Not in weeks or months, but in the very first 24 hours after Charles passes. Strap in, because what follows is not speculation. It is a forensic examination of the protocols, legal instruments, constitutional conventions, and royal prerogatives that will be activated the moment the coded message leaves Clarence House. And here is the question you need to sit with as we walk through this. At what point does exile become permanent? Loss number 1, the title architecture collapses. Let us start where the monarchy always starts with titles. In the British system, titles are not decorative. They are legal architecture. They determine access, privilege, precedence, and power. And the moment King Charles III passes, the sovereign authority to define, restrict, and revoke those titles transfers instantly to King William V. Under Charles, there was a studied ambiguity around the Sussexes' status. Their Duke and Duchess titles remained intact. Archie and Lilith were allowed to become prince and princess once Charles ascended. There was always the sense, the hope even that the family rift might one day close, and so the door was never formally bolted. William will bolt it. The mechanism by which he does this is called letters patent. These are royal decrees issued under the sovereign's absolute prerogative, and they can rewrite the royal landscape with surgical precision. In the first 24 hours of his reign, William is widely expected to issue new letters patent that draw a hard constitutional line between working royals and all others. The effect on Harry and Meghan would be immediate. Their styles of His Royal Highness and Her Royal Highness, already voluntarily suspended in public usage, would be stripped of every remaining official context. Gone from state documents, gone from court circulars, gone from the official website of the royal family. But think about what that really means for them. Their entire American enterprise, the Netflix deal, the Spotify deal, the speaking circuit, the Archwell Foundation, all of it rests on proximity to the crown. The moment the palace officially reclassifies them as non-royal in the eyes of the state, the commercial edifice they have spent 5 years building starts to tremble at its foundations. Ask yourself, would the same boardrooms, the same global audiences, the same media power players have opened their doors to Harry and Meghan if they were simply a former soldier and his wife? The royal brand is the product, and William's letters patent will be the first strike against it. Loss number 2, the children's royal identity. If the loss of their own titles is painful, what happens to Archie and Lilith will be the wound that never heals. When Charles ascended the throne in September 2022, the George V Convention of 1917 automatically elevated his grandchildren to the styles of prince and princess. Archie became Prince Archie. Leet became Princess Leet. This was not a gift from the palace. It was a constitutional function of the succession rules. And for Harry and Meghan, those titles were not merely about status. They were the symbolic bridge between their children and the heritage they had left behind. Now consider what King William V has the legal power to do in his first day as sovereign. William has been unambiguous in his vision of a slimmed-down monarchy. He believes correctly most constitutional scholars would agree that a royal family with dozens of princes and princesses is an institution that will struggle to survive the scrutiny of a modern democratic society. His model for the crown is focused, lean, and direct. And within that model, there is simply no room for a prince and princess who live in Monaco, carry American citizenship, and have never performed a single royal duty on behalf of the crown. In those first 24 hours, William is expected to consult with the Lord Chancellor, act on the ground before Harry can mount a legal challenge. What does that leave Archie and Lilith with? Courtesy titles. Archie might be referred to as the Earl of Dumbarton. Leet as Lady Mountbatten Windsor, private citizens with famous bloodlines and no royal standing. And now here is the question you should be asking. How does Harry fight that from California? How does a man who publicly renounced the working royal life argue in a British court that his children deserve the very royal identity he himself rejected? The answer constitutionally is that he probably cannot. The new king's prerogative in matters of royal title is essentially unchallenged. Loss number 3. The Duchy of Cornwall's financial shield. Money. Let us talk about money because this is where the Sussexes' situation becomes not just symbolically difficult, but practically precarious. For years, Prince Harry's lifestyle was underwritten, at least in part, by the revenues of the Duchy of Cornwall. This is not an accusation. It is a constitutional fact. The Duche exists to provide an income for the heir to the throne. And when William was Prince of Wales, it generated a surplus that Charles used among other things to support his sons. Harry's security costs during his transition away from royal duties, his legal battles, elements of his operational infrastructure. These did not come purely from Netflix advances. There was a financial cushion provided by a father who still, whatever his public statements, wrote checks. The moment Charles passes, the Duche of Cornwall passes to William. And then, because William becomes king rather than Prince of Wales, it passes in management to the crown with its revenues reserved for Prince George as future heir. William controls the surplus, and William has no financial obligation, legal or moral in his view, to direct a single pound in Harry's direction. The financial audit begins within hours of the accession. Every grace and favor arrangement, every shared cost structure, every informal financial bridge that Charles maintained between the palace and the Sussex household will be examined. William is a man who believes in what he calls a closed loop. If you are not contributing to the daily operations of the firm, you do not draw from the firm's accounts. By that measure, Harry and Meghan have been drawing without contributing for years. That account is now closed. Now, consider the full weight of what the Sussexes are left carrying. Montecito real estate, private security teams that sources estimate cost several $1 million annually. Ongoing legal battles against British tabloids, a lifestyle built on the expectation that the underlying financial architecture of royal life would always be available in some form. Harry did inherit money from Princess Diana and the Queen Mother, but that capital is finite, and it does not regenerate. Without the ongoing informal subsidy of the palace's financial apparatus, the quiet support that Charles never fully withdrew, the Sussexes are for the first time genuinely on their own. And here is the brutal commercial irony. The moment the palace's financial connection is severed publicly, Harry and Meghan's commercial value takes another hit. Because their commercial value was always partly backed by the implicit understanding that they retained some relationship with the crown. Once William makes it clear through official channels, court circulars, and the financial audit that there is no relationship, the market recalibrates accordingly. Loss number 4, Frogmore Cottage and the UK base. Home is not just property. In the royal world, home is a statement of standing, and Harry and Meghan are about to lose their last foothold in the United Kingdom. Frogmore Cottage was not just a house. It was a symbol of the Sussexes' continued connection to royal Britain. A property held under a grace and favor arrangement that said implicitly, you may have stepped back, but there is still a door for you here. Under King William, that door closes within the first 24 hours of the new reign. A formal review of all grace and favor residences on the Crown estate will be initiated. The legal standard for occupancy requires that the resident be either a working member of the royal family or someone with an active formal relationship with the palace. Harry and Meghan, as non-domiciled, non-working former royals permanently resident in California, fail both tests. Frogmore sits empty for the overwhelming majority of the year. It requires maintenance, staff, security infrastructure, and ongoing cost. William, who has repeatedly spoken about the monarchy demonstrating value for money to the British public, cannot justify a sprawling royal estate sitting empty 350 days a year to maintain the fiction of a connection that no longer exists. The eviction, when it comes, will be handled through the palace's legal offices, not announced as a public confrontation. But the effect is the same. Harry and Meghan will have no home base in Britain. If they fly to London for the funeral, and they will not be arriving at a property that belongs to their family history. They will be checking into a hotel or accepting a private friend's hospitality, navigating the city like any other high-profile private citizen, which is exactly what they now are. Loss number 5, State F. Foon Security. Of all the battles Harry has fought since stepping back from royal duties, none has been more persistent, more public, or more emotionally charged than his fight for UK police protection. He has argued in court and in the press that his security situation in Britain remains uniquely dangerous. He is the brother and not a working royal brother. A private citizen who lives in California who has written a memoir criticizing the royal family and its institutions and who has no formal constitutional role. The Executive Committee for the Protection of Royalty and Public Figures, RACE, meets regularly to assess the protection roster. In the first day of the new reign, a review will be triggered. The outcome, almost certainly, is that Harry's eligibility for publicly funded security in the UK does not survive the transition. He will be treated as what he is, a high-profile private individual who must fund and arrange his own protection. Think about what that means practically. If Harry and Meghan attend the funeral, and the eyes of the world will be watching to see whether they do, they will arrive without a royal motorcade, without a ring of metropolitan police officers, without real-time intelligence from MI5 Fed 2. Their security team, their own private security contractors, cannot carry firearms in the United Kingdom. In a crowd of hundreds of thousands of mourners in a city where he has been the subject of multiple death threats, Harry will stand outside the royal security perimeter for the first time in his life. The optics of that moment, Harry navigating a London paparazzi scrum, without so much as a single palace-sanctioned protection officer, will say more about his new status than any court circular or letters patent ever could. Loss number 6, military uniform and ceremony. Prince Harry served 2 tours in Afghanistan. He earned his wings. He wore his uniform with a pride that ran deeper than ceremony. It was, by his own account, the part of royal life that made most sense to him. The military identity was not performance. It was genuine, which is why what happens in the first 24 hours of King William's reign will cut so deeply. As sovereign, William is Commander-in-Chief of the British Armed Forces. The right to wear military uniform at state occasions, including the lying in state and funeral of a monarch, is his to grant or deny. For working royals, it is automatic. For non-working royals, it is discretionary, and the discretion in this case will be exercised without sentimentality. William is aware of the deep public resonance of this issue. The Queen's funeral offered a preview. Harry wore a mourning suit rather than uniform to the vigil, a decision that was widely read as a deliberate humiliation. Under King William, that is not a temporary compromise to be revisited. It becomes the settled rule. Within the first day of the new reign, the Lord Chamberlain's office will issue the dress code directives for all state funeral proceedings. Non-working royals, including Harry, will be required to attend in civilian mourning dress. This means that while William stands in full ceremonial regalia, the gold braid, the medals, the cap badge of a king and general, Harry stands beside him in a suit in a procession of armed forces veterans. His 2 tours and his campaign medals count for nothing in the eyes of the protocol. Ask yourself, what does that do to a man whose military service was the most authentic expression of who he believed himself to be? And ask yourself what it does to the watching world's perception of who he is now. Loss number 7, the Counselors of State role. This one is technical, but it matters enormously because it represents Harry's last thread of formal constitutional relevance to the British state. Counselors of State are the senior royals designated to act on behalf of the sovereign when the monarch is abroad or incapacitated. They can sign state papers, receive ambassadors, and perform certain royal duties in the king's name. Harry currently sits on this list by virtue of birth order. As the son of the late king, his proximity to the succession keeps him technically eligible. Within the first 24 hours of William's reign, the new king is expected to move quickly on this. The legal requirement for counselors of state includes having a domicile in the United Kingdom. Harry, as a permanent resident of California, arguably fails this test already, but William will not leave it to a technical argument. He is expected to formally recommend to Parliament that the legislation governing councillors of state be updated, with an explicit UK residency requirement, citing both legal clarity and constitutional efficiency. The significance of this is not merely ceremonial. It is the formal acknowledgement in law that Harry holds no functional constitutional role. He is removed not just from the working of the monarchy in practice, but from the very statutory framework that gives senior royals their legal standing. After this, what constitutional tether to the United Kingdom does Harry have? He remains in the line of succession. But the line of succession is, as one constitutional scholar once put it, less a position of power and more a waiting list. Without the counselors of state role, without HR status in any active sense, without a UK domicile or royal duties, Harry's connection to the British constitutional order becomes entirely symbolic. He is in the succession the way a name can be in a phone book. Present but unreachable. Loss number 8, the protocol, James's palace, and in every one of these settings, the position of Harry and Meghan will be deliberately clinically defined. Harry will not be present in the inner circle of the accession council. He is no longer the son of the king. He is the brother and not a working one In the hierarchy of the court, this is a significant demotion, one that translates directly into physical placement. Meghan's position is even more precisely managed. As the spouse of a non-working royal who has publicly criticized the institution, she is treated for protocol purposes as a private guest rather than a working member of the family. What does this look like on the ground? It means Harry and Meghan may not walk in the main procession behind the coffin. They may be directed to car transport alongside other non-working relatives while the working royals and their spouses process on foot. It means their seating in the chapel is arranged to be visible but not prominent. It means that the moments the cameras linger on the family gathering on the steps of Windsor, the private prayers at St. George's Chapel, the intimate moments at the lying-in-state vigil may not include them. The palace communications team will not announce any of this. There will be no statement saying Harry and Meghan have been excluded from X. The exclusions will simply be manifest in the photographs, in who is standing where, in who is present in the rooms that matter. This is gaslighting by protocol, the most powerful kind, because it requires no words and leaves no evidence except the images themselves. Loss number 9, the royal website and official record. This one sounds small. It is not. The royal family's official website is not just a public information resource. It is a constitutional document in digital form. It reflects in real time the official status of every member of the royal family as recognized by the palace. And within hours of the accession, the website will be updated to reflect the reality of King William's reign. Harry and Meghan will be moved, not deleted. They cannot be fully deleted from the historical record, but their names, photographs, and profiles will be relocated from the working members section to something closer to a legacy or extended family category. Below the Princess Royal, below the Duke of Kent, in a section that exists as an acknowledgement of their existence rather than a recognition of their role. Their HR styling will be omitted in all new official publications. The court circular, the daily official record of the royal family's engagements, will not carry their names except in the context of historical reference. They will, in the language of the palace, cease to be operational. And why does this matter so much? Because in the age of the internet, official recognition is brand infrastructure. Every time a search engine, a media outlet, a booking agency, or a corporate partner looks up Harry and Meghan, the first authoritative result they encounter is the palace website. Once that website reclassifies them, the reclassification ripples outward into every other context. Their Wikipedia entries update, their official protocol forms change, their status in every international diplomatic register shifts. This is the digital expression of the letter's patent, and it happens before the ink is even dry on the constitutional changes. Loss number 10, access to the royal archives and institutions. This loss is quieter than most, but for Harry, a man who wrote a memoir partly as an attempt to control his own historical narrative, it is perhaps the most strategically consequential. The British Royal Archives hold documents, correspondence, photographs, and records that trace the full story of every member of the House of Windsor. As a senior royal under his father, Harry had a degree of access to this archive. Not total access, but the kind of family access that allowed him to reference private letters, recall documented conversations, and situate his own story within the official historical record. That access disappears with Charles. Under King William, access to the royal archives for non-working family members is subject to the sovereign's discretion. William has no obligation, constitutional or otherwise, to provide Harry with research access to documents that form part of the Crown's official record. This is not a petty act of revenge. It is simply the application of rules that have always existed but were never enforced against a son of the king. Against a brother, they will be enforced. The royal muse, the royal collection, the royal travel infrastructure. Harry's access to all of these is quietly but completely revoked in the first 24 hours. If he wants to visit the Royal Art Collection, he books a public tour like anyone else. If he needs transport to a royal occasion, he arranges his own. The invisible infrastructure of royal life. The things Harry never had to think about because they were simply there is simply no longer there. Loss number 11. The Sussex office shuts down. For years, Harry and Meghan have maintained a skeletal royal household presence in the United Kingdom. This office, a small operation, handling correspondence, charity coordination, and formal liaison with the palace, has been a quiet institutional lifeline. It is the structural expression of the idea that even in step back, there is still a connection, still a professional relationship with the crown. William's first instructions to the royal households will involve an efficiency review of closed doors before the rest of the world has even finished processing the news of Charles's passing. Think about what that office represented in practice. It was the address that meant Harry and Meghan still had a formal footprint on British soil. It handled the dignified reception of royal correspondence, managed relationships with the charities they patron, and crucially maintained a back channel of communication with the palace that no Netflix deal or American PR firm could replicate. That back channel is now gone. This matters because the office was more than administrative. It was the last formal institutional connection between the Sussexes and the working machinery of the British Crown. Without it, they cannot claim in any operationally meaningful sense to represent any royal interest. They cannot access palace resources. They cannot use official channels for correspondence with the UK government or Commonwealth organizations. The last thread of institutional connection is cut. Now, ask yourself, what does Archewell look like without any institutional connection to the British Crown? What does the Sussex brand look like when it is in every formal sense a private American enterprise with no relationship to the monarchy whatsoever? That is the question that will be answered not in a year or a decade, but in the 24 hours after Charles passes. Loss number 12, the option of return. We have talked about titles, money, property, protocol, security, uniforms, offices. But the final and most irreversible thing Harry and Meghan lose in the first 24 hours of King William's reign is the one that cannot be replaced by any legal challenge or commercial success. They lose the possibility of going home. Under Charles, there was always a door. It was not an open door, and it was not a welcoming door, but it existed. Charles made it clear in private through intermediaries and in the careful ambiguity of his public statements that he had not written his son off, that the conversation was not over, that the flame was still burning, however low. For Harry, whatever his public bravado about freedom and independence, that flame mattered enormously because it meant that the exile was not total. It was chosen, and it could, in some future version of events, be unchosen. William extinguishes that flame in the first 24 hours by reallocating the financial instruments, by issuing the letters patent, by terminating the security arrangements, by closing the Sussex office, by removing them from the official website, by enforcing the uniform ban, by managing the funeral protocol to place them firmly outside the inner circle. William is not doing any of these things out of spite, or at least not primarily. He is doing them because he is a king who understands that ambiguity is a threat to institutional stability. And Harry and Meghan, existing in a liminal royal space, neither fully in nor fully out, represent the most destabilizing form of ambiguity the palace has faced in a generation. By making the exile total and institutional, William removes the ambiguity. There is no half-in anymore. There is no door left ajar. There is no version of events in which Harry returns to a senior working royal role and repairs the brand damage of Spare and the Netflix documentary. The bridge has not been burned. It has been formally demolished under constitutional authority, with the debris cleared and the ground leveled. And here is the final devastating irony. Harry left the royal family in 2020. He is said to find freedom, to live on his own terms, to build a life that was authentic rather than institutional. He achieved some of that. The Netflix deal, the memoir, the home in California, the life outside the palace walls. But in the process, he built a version of himself that is still fundamentally defined by the palace he left. His commercial value depends on his proximity to the crown. His public identity is inseparable from his royal origins. His children's sense of heritage is tied to titles he himself rejected. And without Charles as the living, breathing connection to all of that, without the father, who, however, difficult their relationship still represented the possibility of reunion, Harry discovers that the freedom he claimed came with a price he may not have fully calculated. As the clock strikes the 24th hour of King William's reign, Harry and Meghan will be in Montego or in a London hotel, or somewhere between in every sense. They will have attended the preliminary funeral proceedings as private guests. They will have stood in the right places but the wrong circles. They will have been photographed without royal salutes, without HR styling, without the institutional architecture that once surrounded them like a second skin. And they will understand, perhaps for the first time with genuine clarity, what it means to be outside the fortress, not estranged from it, not in negotiation with it, outside it in the cold, looking in at a monarchy that has moved on with surgical efficiency, that is preparing for a new king's coronation that has no role for them and no need for them and no intention of creating one. Charles was the last soft thing between Harry and that cold. Now that softness is gone, The question the world will be watching to see answered is not what Harry and Meghan lose in those 24 hours. We have just walked through that answer in detail. The one that will define the next chapter of their extraordinary, turbulent, and still unfinished story. Is this what do they build in the place of everything that's been taken? And is there enough left of the Sussex brand, the Sussex resilience, and the Sussex belief in their own narrative to build it? That, unlike the palace protocols, is a question that no king can answer for them. If this breakdown of the hidden protocols behind Operation Many Bridge has given you a clearer picture of what is really at stake behind the royal headlines, subscribe now and join a community of over 50,000 royal watchers who go beyond the ceremony to understand the machinery beneath. Drop a comment below. Do you think King William is making the right call for the future of the monarchy?